You know, it's a huge question. Why do intelligence agencies, world leaders, pretty much everyone get caught by surprise when autocrats make these moves that just seem completely illogical? Well, today we're going to dive right into the psychological trap that leads to these massive, and I mean massive, intelligence failures. Take a look at this quote. "He will not initiate an escalation." Those were the exact words of French President Emmanuel Macron, and he was talking about Vladimir Putin. The date? February 8th, 2022. Just 16 days later, Russian tanks were rolling across the border, kicking off the biggest land war in Europe since World War II. And believe me, Macron was not alone. In late January, Ukraine's own President Zelensky was calling the U.S. warnings nothing more than panic. And get this, the German government was so sure Russia wouldn't attack that its intelligence chief was literally in Kiev on the day the invasion started and had to be rushed out in an emergency evacuation. Even Putin's own soldiers were told to pack their dress uniforms because they expected to be in a victory parade in just a few days. So the signs were all there, but the belief, it just wasn't. But here's the thing that's really wild. The invasion of Ukraine, it's not some one-off event. It's actually part of this long, really troubling pattern of surprise. And it makes you ask the real question, why do we keep getting this so wrong? Let's just rewind the clock to 1973. Israeli intelligence had clear warnings that Egypt was about to attack the Sinai. They just brushed them off. And their reasoning? They figured Egypt's air force wasn't strong enough to really do any damage. They totally misjudged their opponent's logic, and they paid a heavy price for it. Or what about 1979? China's leader, Deng Xiaoping, literally told the U.S. President, Jimmy Carter, that he was planning to invade Vietnam, just straight up told him. And the warning? It was dismissed. And then the invasion happened. And then we see it again in 1991. Right up until the very moment Iraqi tanks were crossing the border, U.S. analysts were absolutely convinced that Saddam Hussein would never, ever be reckless enough to invade Kuwait. I mean, time and time and time again, the logical assessment turns out to be the wrong one. So what is going on here? What's the common thread that connects all of these colossal intelligence failures, from the Sinai Desert all the way to the fields of Ukraine? It can't just be bad luck. No, it's a fundamental flaw in how we think. And that flaw lies in this mental blueprint that policymakers and analysts just love to use. It's called the rational actor model. And as the name kind of gives away, it assumes that leaders are going to act, well, rationally. You know, that they'll carefully weigh all the information, all the costs, and all the benefits before they make a big decision. And you can see why that's so appealing, right? It brings this comforting sense of order to a really chaotic world. We want to believe that leaders with so much power on the line are going to make logical choices. But here's the problem, and it's a big one. This model has a fatal flaw. And it works especially poorly when you're trying to predict what an autocrat's going to do next. So let's break down exactly why this logical blueprint just completely shatters when it comes up against the reality of how autocrats actually rule. Welcome to Section 2, when logic isn't enough. Okay, this slide just illustrates the gap perfectly. On one side, you've got the rational model, which assumes a leader is methodically weighing all the costs and listening to different opinions. But an autocrat's reality? That is a completely different world. Their calculations are often driven by personal ego and, crucially, regime survival. And maybe most important of all, they're surrounded by yes men in a tightly sealed echo chamber. Let's ground this with a couple of classic examples. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, American analysts just couldn't wrap their heads around why the Soviets would take such an insane risk. They were only focused on the costs. But from Khrushchev's point of view, the military and psychological advantages were totally worth it. It's a similar story with Saddam Hussein. Analysts thought he'd rationally focus on paying off his war debts. But from where Saddam was sitting, conquering Kuwait's oil fields wasn't just an option. It was the only way to pay those debts and guarantee his own survival. So this information bubble is absolutely crucial. Dictators create an echo chamber around themselves that protects them from any reality that doesn't fit their worldview. In Putin's case, it looks like only a tiny handful of his top officials even knew the invasion was coming, and they all shared his exact same biases and beliefs about how it would go. There was just no one there to say, hey, wait a minute, this is a terrible idea. Okay, so if the rational model's broken, what do we do? What do we replace it with? It's not enough to just point out the problem. We need a solution. And that brings us to our next section, searching for better clues and how we can build a better analytical toolbox. All right, first things first. No model, I don't care how complex it is, can perfectly predict what a human being is going to do.
That's just not how it works. So the goal here isn't perfect prediction. The goal is to prepare for a much, much wider range of possibilities, especially the ones that seem totally irrational from our point of view.
So here's a new framework. Step 1 is to simulate the irrational. Instead of just one logical path, you map out the entire universe of mistakes and miscalculations an adversary could make. Step 2, understand the leader's specific mindset. Use behavioral models that factor in things like personality and emotion. And step 3, this one is the most critical. Trust the on-the-ground intelligence that contradicts what everyone thinks is the logical plan. Yeah, this on-the-ground intelligence is everything. We're talking about military orders that don't make sense or troops mobilizing when it seems like a bad idea. This stuff is your early warning system. It's the flashing red light telling you an illogical action might be on its way. And this is exactly what U.S. intelligence got right in late 2021 when they documented Russia's preparations, even when so many leaders just refused to believe it. So now let's take this new lens and apply it to what might just be the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoint in the entire world today, the Taiwan question. And this forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. Are we, right now, falling into the exact so rational actor trap, and is it causing us to completely misjudge China's intentions for Taiwan? Well, let's look at the two competing views. The conventional, rational view says an invasion would be devastatingly costly for China, so obviously they won't do it. But what if the view from inside Xi Jinping's echo chamber is totally different? What if he believes a war could actually be swift and successful? What if he thinks his troops might be welcomed? Or that the West might just stand by and not intervene? Now, these could be disastrous miscalculations, but as we've already seen, they are exactly the kind of mistakes autocrats are prone to make. So if we can't rely on what just seems logical, what are the real, tangible, on-the-ground warning signs we should be watching for? This is kind of like the new checklist. First, you've got large, unexplained military buildups, with troops moving into offensive positions. Second, strategic stockpiling of national reserves. Think massive buys of oil, or large-scale hoarding of food. And finally, and this is so important, look for military orders that directly contradict the official government policy. These are the hard facts that can cut right through the noise of our own rational assumptions.
Which really leaves us with this one final, kind of paradoxical thought. When you're dealing with leaders who operate outside of conventional logic, maybe the most rational plan of all is to prepare for the irrational. Because history shows us, time and again, that the move you're absolutely convinced will never happen, well, that's the one you have to be ready for.